Welcome to Millsboro, Delaware, a typical quiet little town located in the southern portion of the small state of Delaware. Millsboro is your typical iconic town, almost straight from the pages of Father Knows Best or Leave It to Beaver. The small city roads wind through developments and housing projects and homes, through shopping areas, through Main Street, where all kinds of stores and shops await visitors and locals alike. Millsboro is founded on the water itself. In fact, at one time there were two towns here, Millsboro itself, which was located on the eastern side of the Indian River and the spillway, and then also the town of Washington, which was located on the western side of the Indian River. Then, in 1830, when the first post office was placed in the area, the postal services refused to allow a new town named Washington to spring out, as many other towns such as named Washington had sprung up due to the fame of the very first president. Therefore, the towns of Washington and Millsboro were consolidated into one town itself, Millsboro. However, Millsboro history goes far beyond that. As we sail above Millsboro Pond, we see the waterways that feed into the Indian River. Actually, the beginning of the Indian River springs up several miles to the west and north in the town of Georgetown, Delaware. From there, the headwaters of the Indian River begin, and they pop up in the town of Millsboro, which at one time was known as Rockhole. And there, in Rockhole, is where much of Millsboro's history begins. In 1791, there was a very strong entrepreneur by the name of Elijah Dickerson, who was able to get an act passed through the General Assembly of Delaware to create a grist mill in the area known as Rockhole, today known as Millsboro. That was actually the beginnings of the town of Millsboro. Now, settlers of English descent had long occupied the lands that were left cleared by the Nanticoke Indians. You have to remember that prior to the European colonists coming, this land was filled with Nanticoke Indian people who lived here for thousands of years, and we cleared the land that had farmlands here. So when the Europeans first came here, rather than clear new lands, they simply overtook our lands in time. Today, however, the Nanticoke are still surviving. They live in a community of their own about 7 miles to the east of Millsboro, in an area that has long been considered their own. In time, one grist mill led to two, and eventually there were about a dozen grist mills, each of them feeding off of the streams and waterways that came through the water entering the Indian River. By damming up the power of the river, the men were able to create force and power through the water itself and make the rivers work for them. The grist mill industry was booming in Millsboro for quite a long time, until Midwestern farmers began massive, large-scale farming, and they were able to produce grains and grist mill work at a cheaper rate than we could here on the peninsula. And so our grist mill operations declined. To make that matter even worse, in the 1930s, a hurricane came through and destroyed many of the dams, creating the power needed to operate the mills. And almost overnight, the grist mill industry became a thing of the past for Millsboro. However, being very progressive and always adapting, the people of Millsboro turned to a larger enterprise, timbering. At that time, lumber was needed in huge amounts, and a large company by the name of House & White formed nearby where the railroad tracks run through Millsboro itself. Trains had replaced boats as the main means of transportation of both foot passengers and cargo and shipping. And so House & White built a very large basket weaving and milling operation right in downtown Millsboro, where present day there are some apartment houses located there. Another industry that many people are unaware of, that Delaware once eclipsed others in, was in the holly wreath, Christmas making industry. For quite a long time, holly wreath making was a mainstay for Delaware farmers. However, in time, that industry also dried up. After those operations had run their course, the next thing that people turned to was the chicken industry, primarily the broilers. And Sussex County, Delaware became known as a chief producer of broilers and chickens nationwide. Today, farmhouses with chickens, with 200,000 chickens at a minimum, are found throughout Sussex County, from Laurel to the waterways of the coastal areas. Here, Washington Street runs up to 113. US 113 is a major connector running north and south, connecting all the various small towns in central Delaware to one another and connecting lower Delaware to northern Delaware. The road that is now known as Washington Street becomes known as John J. Williams Highway and crosses further across the county all the way to the towns of Laurel, thereby connecting west to east. However, that road also connects into another dual highway. Routes 113 and Route 13, the furthest dual highway to the west of the state, are multi-lane highways, and all the smaller roads such as John J. Williams Highway, Route 24, and other beach roads heading east and west are nothing more than two-lane roads. As a result, the roadways are simply overwhelmed and cannot handle the burden. The same roads that once handled a few hundred cars a day through the towns of Millsboro now must handle thousands of cars an hour. One of the downsides of Sussex County and the Millsboro area has been the failure of the county and politicians and elected officials to keep pace with the infrastructure, with the development pace and growth that we have experienced. Fault can be found all around, and those who have caused this problem should own up to it and correct it immediately, as it is disturbing the quality of life that was once enjoyed here. Those same politicians must also be reminded that they cannot kill the goose that laid the golden egg. The quality of life that was known to be Sussex County, the quality of the beaches, the cleanliness of the water, all of those things must be maintained, preserved, and ensured for the future. Otherwise, we will be killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. People do not move to Sussex County to see chickens. They come here for access to the water and to a quality of life that, if it is altered or destroyed, will no longer attract people as it does today. Even though Millsboro is several miles inland, today it is touted as a location close to the coastal areas. As the crow flies, Millsboro is not that far from the coastal beaches. Millsboro was one of the last towns in Delaware to embrace integration. It's a sad part of history, but a truthful part of the history, that Millsboro was one of the last towns to remain segregated with restaurants and schools. In fact, the local Nanticoke Indian tribal members were not permitted to attend the public schools until about 1962. There were racial problems and racial strife. However, today, present-day Millsboro is a microcosm of the world. You will find all races and nationalities and types of people from all across the world here today. You will find all genders and all lifestyles here. In essence, Millsboro is a thriving place that represents the United States of America quite well. Here on Route 113, we see a major corridor which runs north and south through the town of Millsboro itself. As it passes through the commercial district, it brings you a food line, doctor's offices, pizza parlors, and all kinds of shops and stores. This area continues to grow, just as Millsboro itself has. The town fathers have done a good job of balancing growth with development, with planning, and with maintaining a quality of life that Millsboro has long been noted for. In the distance, you can still see how the farmlands cuddle up close to the town itself. Of course, on 113 is the ever-familiar Baker's Hardware, long a mainstay in Millsboro. If Baker's doesn't have it, you probably don't need it in the first place. Baker's was here long before other shops were here, and it will be here long after those are gone. It's one of those businesses that is family owned and family operated and known as a local spot. Here we see the traffic building up on Route 113 as it heads towards the commercial area further south of town. Years ago, a large industrial park was built outside of town where there's a huge Lowe's store and a BJ's anchor store. Several other stores and doctor's offices are also found in this complex. Apparently, more growth and development is planned for this area, as there are far more parking spaces available than there are buildings and facilities at this time. The complexes here are huge, and many a person needs to use one of the scooters that are available to get from point A to point B. Also on Route 113 are several smaller businesses, law offices, doctor's offices and such, that have also been a long time part of Millsboro, Delaware. Millsboro reflects a good balance of the old and the new. Many of the family names that have been here for 200 years can still be found in the area. However, beside them are new names from people who have come here from Philadelphia, New York, Virginia, and the Washington, D.C. area. Although there is admittedly a love-hate relationship between the tourists and the locals, the truth of the matter is, without the influx of new blood and new ideas, Millsboro and towns such as Millsboro itself would stagnate and die and dry up. Every now and then you need a little breath of fresh air and an injection of some new blood. And Millsboro is a perfect example of how progress and tradition can meet.